only nervous yesterday, but now I'm more excited.
Okay.
Maybe they are.
Yeah.
They're my debut group.
Yeah, they're
They seem
so
lovely.
nice.
Oh, good.
It's been great.
Sounds great.
Oh, no, I know.
Today. My name is Grace and I'm an events associate here at the store. And we host about 500 author events a year, and you can find out more on our events flyer, our website, and our various social media platforms. Tonight we're very excited to host a launch party for Rachel Lynn Solomon's debut book, You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone, a tale of two fraternal twins who deal with differing test results for Huntington's. This powerful novel tackles guilt, betrayal, Jewish identity, and first love. Rachel Lynn Solomon lives in Seattle and loves tap dancing, red lipstick, and new wave music. A former journalist, she's worked for NPR, produced a radio show that aired in the middle of the night, and currently works in education. And once she even helped set a Guinness World Record for the most natural redheads in one place. That's quite an achievement. Rachel's in conversation today with her friend and fellow local author, Joy McCullough. She studied theater at Northwestern University, fell in love with her husband atop a Guatemalan volcano, and now spends her day surrounded by books and kids and chocolate. That's a good day. Blood, Water, Paint is her debut novel, and we'll be hosting her launch party here at the store in March, so look out for that as well. The books are on the cube right over there. They were behind you, but we've had to expand due to a great turnout. And you can purchase them at any register. If you parked in the back lot, I'd be happy to validate your parking. And there's no event after this, so feel free to stay and mingle after the event. Take your time and enjoy. And now please join me in welcoming Rachel Lynn Solomon.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's still kind of overwhelming and surreal, and I think the weirdest thing so far has been seeing like other people hold the book. So everyone holding it right now is just like so mind-blowing. But yeah, thank you for coming, and Joy, thank you. You told me not to say it anymore, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you. And so Joy is just going to lead a little Q&A, and then I'm going to read a very short passage, so no one will get too bored. And then you guys can ask questions, and then we'll do the signing over there, and you can feel free to have, I'm really good at holding the microphone. You can feel free to have food over there at any time. So, Joy.
Yay, so hi, I'm Joy. I'm so excited to be here. Rachel and I have been going through our publishing journey sort of step by step, really hitting the same milestones along the way for a couple of years. We got new agents at the same time, and we got our book deals right around the same time, and we're debuting together, and it's been really exciting. Rachel is my go-to person who I go to whenever I have something new and exciting to share, or I have something really, really frustrating to vent about. She's just been such an amazing writing friend for me, and I'm so thrilled to be here with her today. So, speaking of those publishing journeys, can you talk a little bit about your journey to this beautiful book being out in the world?
Yeah, so I think most of you who have heard me talk about it or follow me online have known that this has sort of been a long journey, but just to go, I guess, back in time and talk a little more about it. So I sort of got serious about writing right after graduating college, which was in 2011. And I'd written until then, but sort of took a break while I was in school. I was studying journalism, so there was a lot of writing that I was just doing in general, and I wasn't really doing fiction or anything fun. I think journalism was sort of fun, I guess. Nothing creative, I guess, or as creative as I wanted to be. So I was working at Cairo Radio. Hopefully no one here works there. I was working there in the middle of the night. I had to be there at 2 in the morning to work on a show that started at 5 in the morning. So there were like 2 or 3 hours where I was the only person in the station, and it was very creepy, and we would get a lot of really weird calls. Just people who like to call radio stations in the middle of the night and say weird things. And I didn't have a desk of my own, it was just this long row of computers. So I would just write emails to myself, because I was afraid to save anything on the computer. And so I wrote these long emails to myself, and then when I got home after I slept, because it was just a weird schedule, I would start, polishing them up, and that eventually became the first book that I was like, oh, I'm actually finishing a book. And I think I worked on that one for probably about a year. It was loosely autobiographical, as I think many people's first books are. And so I wound up querying that book and then querying a couple more before I found my first agent. And then we went on submission, so essentially she was submitting the book to publisher, or different books to publishers for a couple of years. And then I wrote this book, and I felt really strongly about it. It just felt different from the other ones. I think it was maybe I allowed myself to be a little more personal with it. I've said a few times that this is the first book that I wrote that had Jewish main characters in it, and I never really read them growing up, and I don't know why it took me so long to write one, probably because I hadn't really read any before. So yeah, there was just something about this one that felt different. Revised it for a long time. I parted ways with that agent because we had differing thoughts on it, and I think it was about like 6 or 7 months after that I found my new agent, who sold this one pretty quickly. So I think it's interesting how often we talk about the debut, and there's so much focus on that first book, but there are often so many other efforts that are sitting on a computer somewhere. But I've always felt like that this was the book that I was meant to debut with, because it encompasses so much of who I am as an author. And yeah, so I'm happy that it worked out the way it did.
Yay! All right, so if you have not already devoured the book, it is about sisters, and Rachel has written it as a dual point of view, so it goes back and forth, a chapter one sister, a chapter the other sister. And writing that way is really, really hard to make both of them equally compelling. Often I'll read a dual POV and I'm interested in one point of view, but then I'm sort of skimming through the next one to get back to the person I'm actually interested in. They're both really equally compelling and really distinct voices. Like, you could pull a sentence out of a chapter without knowing whose it was from the beginning, and you'd be able to tell from the voice, oh, that's a Tova chapter, or that's an Adina chapter. So can you talk a little bit about point of view and how you got into those different distinct voices for each of the sisters?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I started writing this book, the first thing that I did was look for references, so other books that had done this kind of thing. And first of all, in YA, there weren't a lot of dual POV books that were not romances, so it would be a guy and a girl for the most part. And I believe I found 1 or 2. There was one that was sisters that were all in third person, and then there was one that was friends, but I'm not sure it was out at that time. No, the one that I found was How to Save a Life by Sarah Zarr, which was 2 girls that were not romantically involved, and they weren't sisters, but they became friends. And yeah, there weren't really a lot of books that I could use as a reference, but I knew that I wanted the 2 voices to be really different. And so what I did was, because I like what you said, how you can pick a sentence out and you know whose it is, and I think that's the mark of, someone who's excelled in dual POV. Hopefully I did a good job. Well, you're my friend. But I think what most people do when they're writing is they have the characters interests and passions color their perspective or their voice. So one character is a viola prodigy, and her language is very like musical, more lyrical. There are longer sentences, and it's just a little like dreamier, I think. She uses like fewer contractions, which I did on purpose. And I actually made a list of musical language that I could use. So every time there was a verb that I could just replace with a verb that sounded a little more musical. So like there's a part, I think in the first chapter, where like the elevator doors, they sing open as opposed to just opening, I guess, would be the alternative. And then for the other character, she's a little more scientifically minded, more logical. She wants to become a surgeon. So her chapters are a little more brusque, a little more to the point. She's more logical, so they're more clipped sentences, and I definitely used a lot of contractions. And then also for her, like I made a list of words that sounded science-y, which was hard because I'm not a science person at all. But so like a pizza slice is like a membrane-thin slice of pizza, which sort of sounds disgusting now that I say it out loud. But yeah, so that really helped me get into the mindset, and also, further establish them to the reader as like these very different people who are fiercely committed to their passions too.
Okay, so those two sisters are Adina and Tova, and I know some people here have already read the book, either from having ARCs or from already reading it, buying it Tuesday. So I want to know, does anyone want to come out as being Team Tova? Anybody gonna? Yes, I think I'm Team Tova myself. Team Adina, anybody? All right. Oh, now see, I was not going to ask you because I was like, I cannot make the author choose between her two main characters, but they are. So I was going to ask you, however, if you have a favorite part of the book, or a favorite scene.
Yeah, I have a few. So it's funny because I know you're not supposed to have favorites when you're children, but I think the reason I connect to Adina more is, so she's the viola prodigy, and she's a little more just confident in who she is. She has a lot of insecurities deep down, but she outwardly projects this very like confident, almost aggressive, subtly manipulative persona, which is very me, of course. No, but I think the reason that I found her so interesting to write is because the way I described this book to my editor the first time I talked to her, and I said that Tova was sort of who I was in high school, and like, everything that you're supposed to be and everything you're supposed to do, and Adina was kind of like all the thoughts that I had that I never acted on, but she acts on them. So I think I just like her because I was able to explore some of those really dark and ugly moments that we all think about, but don't often make it onto the page, or very rarely make it out loud past our own minds. So one of my favorite scenes, I guess I'll go with the scene that's kind of a nice one. There's a scene, so when the book opens, the sisters have kind of been at odds for a while. They are 18 and they're about to take a genetic test to see if they will inherit Huntington's, which their mother is suffering from. And for those who don't know, it's a degenerative disease similar to Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. It's the kind of disease that just slowly steals like control of your mind and your body, and it's often accompanied by vocal tics, memory loss. It often strikes people in their 40s or 50s, and it's just sort of a slow decline from there. And the reason that I know I'm sort of getting off track, but the reason that I wanted to write about it was because this just really staggering statistic that a child of a parent who has Huntington's has a 50% chance of developing it. So my first kind of idea nugget was, what if they were sisters who had opposite results, and on top of that, what if they were twins? So when the book opens, the two sisters are not close. They've sort of been estranged for years for reasons that become apparent as you read the book. And they are the results kind of drive them apart, and then they inch back together, and then things drive them apart again. It's just kind of a roller coaster of sorts until they can kind of find their way back to each other. But there's this one scene that I really like. It's sort of, I think it's chapter 11 or so. It's like still have a very clear memory of what all the chapters are somewhat. And their family has taken like a weekend trip up to Canada just to kind of like get away from everything. They've already gotten their test results, and the twin who has tested positive has kind of been very isolated for the past few weeks. And there's this one moment when they're in a hotel up in Victoria, BC. A lot of my books have trips to Canada because they're all set here. And the two sisters are just very withdrawn and kind of afraid to like bridge that gap between the other. And then there's like a crappy movie on TV, and they just sort of, they're like sitting in the hotel room, and one of them starts making fun of it, and they're like, oh wait, remember we both really like crappy movies and we like making fun of them. And they are able to kind of get back into this relationship where they're just interacting with the movie and like talking about, you know, making fun of things in it, and they're underneath the surface there's just a lot that they aren't saying, and it's this little moment where they're able to reclaim some of their closeness, but they haven't talked about any of the issues that they have. So it's both a really sweet moment and I think a really sad one too, because you know at that moment that there's still a lot that they have to go through to get back a relationship that I guess that they used to have, but it'll still be very different.
I love that, and I love that scene, and I love how much isn't said, because a lot of beginner writers will often say absolutely everything that a character is thinking. They put it all on the page, but there's so much more when you leave that off the page, and what's interesting is what they're not saying, and Rachel does a wonderful job with that. So I think there's a big emphasis on getting a book deal, at least in the writing community. There's a lot of talk about querying and submission and stuff. We don't talk as much about the process after you've gotten the book deal, because it's usually a pretty long process from when you get the deal to when the book comes out. And it has plenty of its own challenges. So I'm curious, both from the very beginning of the seed of the idea of the book to now, through the publication process, what's been the most challenging part?
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, a lot of things. But I think what's really interesting is the book has morphed so much, and I have all these old versions in my head, and there are so many characters that just don't exist anymore, and so many lines that I liked that aren't in it anymore. Definitely still some that I do. I think that sometimes when we get asked to cut a line, you're like, but that's my only pretty line. If I delete that, then the book is terrible. But a few good ones are still in there. So yeah, like just this idea of realizing there's only one final version that is out in the world, and all those old versions are just kind of ghosts and just live in my head and in my Dropbox. Yeah, like it's just very strange to think of it as it's been a living document for so long, and for it to be this very final thing was sort of a hard thing to come to terms with it. I think I had that moment maybe a month or two ago where I was like, this is done. Like, yeah. I think it was because I had this thought that was like, oh, it would have been so cool if I had done this instead, and it would have totally changed the book. So yeah, just like realizing that this is done and I can't make changes, and all those old versions. There was one version where Tova was a drug dealer that no one would ever read.
Well, my next question is about what surprised you most, but I have to say right now I'm really, really surprised by the fact that Tova was ever a drug dealer. That's like going to give me a whole new reading of it when I reread. But in terms of the process from when the book was acquired, which means when the editor bought it, what has surprised you the most about the process?
So I think that I assumed when a book was acquired that it was going to change a lot, and it definitely did change a lot, but there are chapters that are still just about exactly the same as they were in my first draft. So actually the first chapter is almost identical to what it used to be. Probably just a few lines here and there have changed, some like foreshadowing maybe. But yeah, first chapter is pretty much the same. Someone messaged me last night and was like, "This is my favorite line. I couldn't stop laughing." It's like a weird Adina, like snarky line. I was like, "Oh, I wrote that a long time ago." And so, yeah, it's fascinating that these lines that I wrote, I guess it was 4 years ago now, the lines and entire chapters are still there. And I think I just assumed the whole thing would be gutted and rewritten, and definitely parts of it were. But yeah, I was surprised by that, and I think just also how much, this varies a lot, but I wound up having a lot of control editorially. And I was very lucky to have a great editor, but I wrote my jacket copy because the copy they sent me originally was not very good. And I was like, oh, let's just change all of it. The book sold with a different title, and we had to come up with a new title. And I sent a list of about 20, and this one was at the top, and I put in parentheses, "This is my favorite." And they wrote back and were like, "We love it." So I was lucky, and I wound up with a title that I liked, and that I got to choose. So, and that's definitely not everyone's experience, but I feel lucky to have had that, really smooth editorial experience.
Yay! So, one of the sisters really, really loves her lipstick. Like, really bright, really bold lipstick. She's kind of known for it. As is Rachel. Rachel loves her lipstick so much it was in her bio that was read earlier that she loves her lipstick. I don't wear bright lipstick normally, but I wore it especially because it was Rachel's launch. So, because I just associate you with bright lipstick. And you put that in the book. And so I'm curious if there are any other little hidden gem inside things that only a few people might find, hidden secrets in your book.
Yeah, so that's funny that you mentioned the lipstick thing, 'cause that was actually something that I added in relatively late.
Really?
Yeah, because I think one thing that happens, and I remember reading so many books like this as a kid, is all the girl characters would be like, "I don't wear makeup, like that's beneath me." And that is sort of how I felt as a teen. Like I was in gifted classes, I was like an AP honors nerd kid. And like, if you wore makeup, like you were, it didn't compute if someone was smart and also wore makeup, and that's just like disgusting and harmful. And especially now as an adult, like I wear it for me and because I enjoy it. So I wanted to write a character who wore it for herself, and that's very clear throughout the book too. Like even at the end, without giving anything away, I guess, like things have happened, but she's still, she dresses for herself and she wears it for herself first of all. So that was sort of a nod to myself, and also just those books that I was angry at as a kid. Or I'm angry at them now. But yeah, so because I used to work in public radio, most of my books have little NPR shout-outs. So this book, someone has an I Heart NPR tote bag. In my 2019 book, one of the characters' dad is a sound engineer at NPR. A couple other things. So late in the editorial process, I actually changed some names in this book as homages to some of my friends. So you might notice some of that. Then there's also in this one chapter, I'm surprised that this stayed in. So Tova used to have like 4 friends, and now she has 1 because writing friends is very hard, especially when you have to give them all a personality. And there's this one chapter where she and her friend are having a sleepover, and they've been kind of, they haven't been close in a while, and that's kind of a whole other part of the book, is like realizing that maybe you and your friends don't fit as well as you used to. And she's like browsing around her friend's room, and she's like, "Oh, do you remember when we did this?" And it is a notebook filled with the names of guys that wronged them in some way. So like a guy that they liked who didn't like them back, or someone who looked at them weird, or a teacher who gave them a bad grade. And this is something that my friends and I did in high school. So we had this sheet, I think it was just a sheet of notebook paper, and we called it the Man-Haters Union, or the MHU.
I love that.
Are you surprised at all that I did this?
A little.
It started out just a sheet of notebook paper that we passed between us, and I think there were 4 or 5 of us. And we eventually needed to laminate it. Because it was,
Is it still in existence? Does someone
no,
have it?
I don't know. I'm not friends with any of them anymore.
Oh, man.
It wasn't enough to bind us. I think in the book I call it the MHC, the Man-Haters Club, maybe? Because I didn't want to totally plagiarize my own life. But yeah, if anyone of that group of 4 people reads it, they will notice that.
Fun.
Yeah, I'm surprised that stayed in. That was just like things tend to start out as jokes to myself, and then they make it to the final draft. I'm like, okay, I guess that's staying. I think I had another. There was a joke with the name of a cat, but now I can't remember it. It's been a long time.
So yeah, she just said it's been a long time. You've been done writing this book for a while, and you mentioned your 2019 book in there in passing, which is exciting news for those of us who've already read this book and loved it and want more Rachel Lynn Solomon words in the world. So tell us about what you're working on now.
Yes, so I need to get used to hearing my full name said aloud. It's unusual. So my 2019 book, which we just retitled, it's called Our Year of Maybe. And it is about it's another dual POV, and it's 2 best friends, a guy and a girl. And it's about a girl who donates a kidney to her best friend who has been chronically ill for his whole life. The catch is that she is also in love with him and hoping, like in this very dark part of her heart that she doesn't really allow herself to think about very much. Heart is over here, I think. That this will now mean that he will love her back, and it's sad, but also helpful. Yeah. I just finished a revision, and my editor has it now, and we'll be doing a couple more rounds of revisions. So, and I should be seeing a cover soon, which is really exciting.
Yay!
And then I'm also working on a YA romantic comedy. That one's not sad. I'm not allowed, no one is allowed to be sick.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I'm excited to get back to both of those.
Yay. All right. So Rachel is going to read for us just a little portion that she has picked out, and then we will take some questions from you guys.
So I think I need to intro this a little bit. So like I said, Adina is the viola prodigy. Just a little more background on the sisters themselves. So they are half Israeli. Their mother is from Israel. She moved to the US for college. And so Adina is in love with her private viola teacher. He's 25, she's 18. And this is from chapter 5. In chapter 1, she sort of attempts to make a move and she is rebuffed. So this scene, it's kind of an introspective scene, but it takes place after the lesson where the move is attempted and things were awkward. I think that's all we need to know. Okay. It's not just that I want to kiss him. It's that I feel more connected to him than I do to anyone else. I've spent my entire life feeling different because I speak another language, because I don't celebrate the same holidays as most people, because I don't call my parents mom and dad. Arjun, who immigrated to the United States as an adult, knows what it is like to be tied to a complicated country. There is a lot of good in India, he said, but also a lot of bad. Israel is similar. I've never met a person who doesn't have a strong opinion about its politics. They always have to share it with me, like there's something I can do about it. Like being half Israeli makes me a representative for an entire nation, an entire people. I don't feel fully American, but a language and half my genes can't be enough to tie me to a place I've never been. Arjun has no praise for today, only critique, though I know I cannot be playing quite that poorly. Perhaps he's trying to more solidly establish himself as the teacher, and me, the student. For the first time, I am relieved when our hour is up. On my way to the bus stop, I buy a cheeseburger from the food truck parked across the street. I am in desperate need of food therapy. It greases up my fingers and tastes perfectly excessively salty. The guy at the counter knows me since I've been coming here after some lessons for nearly a year. He asked for my number once, but greasy food truck guy is not exactly my type. I have an incurable fondness for musicians. No one knows I don't keep kosher when I'm not at home. After Ima's diagnosis, it stopped seeming important. Why did God care what I ate? Why did separating meat and dairy and 100 other provisions matter when my mother was suffering so much? At home, I observe Shabbat because it means so much to my family. But the day of rest makes me restless, and the services at synagogue are too long. I'm not sure what I believe in anymore, or what I ever believed in, but it's not anything as insignificant as this. When I move out, I will eat whatever I want and practice any time I want, even on Shabbat.
All right. Why don't you hold on to the mic?
Sure.
But let's take questions. Any questions for Rachel? Go ahead.
What do you like about the dual point of view, since you're writing 2 books like that?
Yeah, so after I wrote this one, I said that I wasn't going to write another one. I think it was just that both ideas came to me that way, and it felt like it was only half a story without the other person's point of view. So with this one, it's the sisters who have the opposite results, and it didn't feel whole without both of them. I think at one point, my old agent, who we won't speak about,
She must not be there.
yeah, told me that I should just write one of them because one of them was really weak. That might have been when she was still a drug dealer. But yeah, so Tova's POV was actually a lot harder, and she was like, maybe you should just stick with one. And this story had to be 2 POVs. And the same with the book about the transplant. I think just showing the donor and the recipient, because there's just so much to explore there, so many complicated emotions. Yeah, after this, then I think I'm taking a break. I don't know if I can do another one, because at the beginning, you're like, okay, it has to be a lot of words, right? Like, this one ended up being 86,000 words, and then the one I'm working on now is currently around 80. So, you don't want it to feel like each person is getting half of a story. You want them to have a full arc.
This is another point of view question, but more from a writer craft perspective. I noticed that several of your chapters, and it was usually that the Adina chapter ended with a line, and then the Tova chapter started. Not with the exact line, because I kept flipping back, because my work in progress is 3D girl point of view, and I love that. I was like, oh, I wish I could do that, because like Nova Ransom did that in World Around Us and stuff, and I just thought that's really cool. But then other chapters didn't do that. So I wondered if it was intentional to do that, or if it was just a natural transition to the next narrator, or kind of how you worked those transitions, because they're hard. They're very hard.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for noticing that, because that is something that I did intentionally for the ones that it appears. So, I mean, just to show you guys an example. Actually, there's one right here. So at the end of this Tova chapter, it says, I won't make that mistake. Oh, no, it's a reminder that today I got too close to him, and I won't make that mistake again. And the next chapter is, today he is much too far away, my mistake heavy between us. And there are a bunch of chapters that kind of go into the next one. Initially, I wanted to do it with every chapter, but it was hard. That's the short answer. I actually got the idea from this book called The Vow by Jessica Martinez, which is it's also a dual POV about a girl whose best friend is in danger of being deported, and so they get married, and I think they're like 18. So they get married so that he can stay in the U.S. And they're best friends, and there's also some complicated romance stuff. It's a really great book, and she does an amazing job of folding those together. So I kind of wanted them to fade in and out depending on like where the sisters' relationship was at. I don't know if I really accomplished that, because just so much was changed during the editorial process. So yeah, they're not, they don't all do that, but I'm happy when people notice.
Yeah, no, it was a cool device. It was subtle.
Yeah.
and then after like the second or third time, I was like, she's doing this.
Thank you.
Hi. I'll talk loud because I'm in the back. So I saw that you're writing something to be included in an anthology. What is that called? The whole spiel?
Yeah, it's called, it's a whole spiel.
It's a
Yeah.
whole spiel, so it's Jewish authors and
Yeah.
writing young adults. So when you were little or young and reading books, were there any books you found about kids that were Jewish or growing up in Jewish families that
No,
were?
I mean, the only books were Holocaust books.
Yeah, right.
And like, those were just kind of heaved onto me. That was,
I was
it was
thinking that. So
my parents over there.
I guess part of the question is that thank you. So thank you for doing that and making that.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous. It's 2018, but thank you for.
Well, and
being part of
that's,
the
I mean,
beginning.
it seems like the kind of thing because also there are so many Jewish people in publishing.
Yeah, that's
that it's shocking that there aren't more, and it seems like, wait, are there really not that many? But like, even just looking on Goodreads, like my book is on like a list that's Jewish, or no, it's like American Jewish literature, and even just on that list, there are not that many books that I know of. And even fewer, I think, that are non-contemporary. Yeah, no, I used to get really excited when I would see a Jewish best friend. Like the Princess Diaries were my favorite books, and you know, Mia's best friend is Jewish, and I loved that. But you know, you can't always be the best friend.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go.
What made you choose medicine as kind of a backdrop to your stories for like Huntington's and the kidney transplants?
She's in medical school.
It was not a stage.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So this actually dates all the way back to 2000, I don't know, 2003, 4, 5. There was this show on the WB called Everwood. I don't know if anyone watched this. There was a storyline in a later season where one of the characters, her father had Huntington's, and she was debating getting tested. And I must have been a very young teen, preteen when I saw it, but there was something about it that really stuck with me. My mom used to watch the show. I don't know where she is, but she's here. My mom used to watch the show and I would watch it with her. And there was something that stuck with me about that storyline. I think just that decision to get tested, just how weighty that must be, and just being able to know, you know, so we never know our fates, and this is a really rare instance where someone can know, and then like, do you want to know? And then I honestly cannot remember how I happened upon it again, but I was just like browsing Wikipedia one day, and I like landed on a page about Huntington's, and it was like, kids of a parent with Huntington's have a 50% chance of developing it, and I was like, oh, what if they were sisters? Yeah, I don't know how I ended up there, but that's how it happened.
Have you always wanted to go into YA? And if not, was there something else you wanted to write about?
Yeah, so the first book that I wrote was sort of straddling the line between like YA and adult. I mean, I guess it was technically new adult, but that sort of became something else. So yeah, I guess I queried that book as like an adult book. And then a friend who's here, Mayanka, told me in a critique group that my voice sounded really YA, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't read young adult books in a very long time. So I went back and I read like 200 books, not all in one night. And I was like, oh, I remember, you know, why I loved all these books and why I loved all these like really raw feelings, and I still felt like I was very in tune with that. I'm like a very like introspective person. I like internalize a lot, so there's just a lot still living in there. And I loved those books, and I loved the idea of being able to write for teens and like undo some of the harmful stuff that I read as a kid. So that was sort of how I landed on it, and yeah, it's most of what I read now, and exclusively what I write.
So someone in the back, please? Yeah.
So I have a question, because your hook is so very like intense, just like two sisters with Huntington's disease and one has and one doesn't. That feels so like like so much conflict already. So I'm curious about how you like plot a whole book, but add like more. I don't know. I guess for me, contemporary is hard to plot because like you don't usually blow things up or add a monster, which is what I do when I'm bored. So
The monster is inside you.
yeah. So like, how did you go about like adding tension throughout the plot when even the whole concept is like pretty intense and full of conflict and full of emotion?
Yeah, so my boyfriend likes to make fun of me because I really like character-driven movies and books to the point where a movie that's just two people talking is my favorite thing. Because, no, I just love relationships and really complex relationships. So a lot of the conflict came from those tense relationship moments. And I also had it take place over senior year, so that it was a lot of like future anxiety and, you know, admissions decisions, because both girls are very driven and committed to certain goals. So there were like little checkpoints that I could hit there. So like, oh, she's going to hear back about early decision here. She has to go for auditions here. She's going to find out if she got off the wait list here or whatever. So there was that. I could also, because I knew it was going to end kind of at the end of the school year. Yeah, really just kind of figuring out like how to make things as difficult for them as possible. Yeah, gosh, and it's also hard with dual POV because I always get the feeling when I start a new chapter, I'm like, what has that person been doing the whole other chapter? And you have to resist the urge to summarize everything, and especially with this book because the sisters are together for very little of it. Which is very different from the book I'm working on now, where it's about two best friends who start out they're each other's entire lives. So yeah, in here they really just have their own separate arcs and lives, and they have different goals that they're working towards. So Adina has like a showcase that she's going to be playing in, and yeah, so I guess just different beats within their relationships with other people and with their goals that they're trying to achieve. I think it's kind of, this is like a burn on myself, I guess, that it's kind of like a cop-out having the college admission stuff because it's so tangible, right, as like a goal, but it worked.
But it's something that a lot of readers can relate to. Yeah. Anybody else? Any last questions?
I just wondered if you're musical because you use your, Adina is really lyrical, and I love when you like to calm herself with like rest or just, and that's so, I thought she's got to be musical because that's not something you can look up and see, okay, well, what would I mean?
What is it? Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? That'd be something that you would personally know, so I was just curious about you.
Yeah, so I played piano growing up, and then I also played in a band in high school. Yeah. And we have a piano. I play Oh, yeah, I dance too. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I tap dance, and that's very also heavily music-based. So it's hard for me to write a character that isn't musical. So actually my next book, one character is a dancer, and the other one is a pianist. So.
All right. Is that it? All right, let me have that. All right, thank you guys all so much for being here. So next we are going to have Rachel over here signing. If you haven't already grabbed a book, there's some over there. There's also some by the cashier in the kids section, which is over there where the bright green signs are. So grab one of those, and then.
I think they want them to pay first.
Yeah, so you want to get your book before you go to the signing. And Rachel will sign for you. And yeah, and there's food, and we have the space so we can stay and we can mingle. So thank you so much, and let's give Rachel a round of applause.
And I was like, been coming to this bookstore. Yeah, from Florida.
Oh wait, you know that?
No, I just was totally random. I was like, oh hey, that's kind of cool. My fiance's job, but I also like work in bookstores and theaters and stuff like that. So it was a really good city county to be in. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of a well, you didn't rename the summer.
I have that. How are you? I know. I actually brought you a bottle of wine because I thought it was so freaking cool that you like. Thank you. Like, don't bring out the okay, it's juice. Yeah. New Year's goal is to start sending stuff out this year. Yeah. Yes.
What's the
Sounds like a
Was it weird? Yes, very weird. Yeah, it's like,
a little bit, yeah. Did you have the dreads when you met?
Yes.
I've only known it.
Yeah, we'll get to the trip. Can you sign it? You have a stamp.
Okay. I'll tag you guys. Oh my gosh, your crafting skills. That is amazing.
Oh, it's coming apart a little bit.
That is just beautiful.
Oh, I can,
Hopefully this matches the sidewalk. I think the leaves might fall off. I was like stitching them on last night. I was like, this isn't gonna stick. Oh yeah, that one already.
okay, so my God.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Have a good birthday.
I haven't signed your book.
Yeah, this is for my mom. No. We're good now. Nice to meet you. Oh, you need to make sure he got this.
I made this. So you need to come too.
Do you have a camera you want me to take it on, Rach?
You didn't sign it.
I will. Sorry.
Old lady gray hair.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
You're not.
Congratulations.
We bought 2 books. Looks like you got a good turnout. Wait, okay. This is what you're enjoying.
Wait, hold on.
I love it. I mean, people there are very nice.
Hold on.
A little letter on the back, which I didn't even notice because I've been eyeing it. We got like a little stand up where I live, which is nuts.
Mine hasn't arrived yet, so I'll take the rain check on it.
Congratulations.
Rachel, it's most impressive. I mean, the entire thing. And I'm astonished at the crowd you got.